Hi, my name is Eddie Gray. I am the director of the Murdoch Centre and Events here at the American Australian Association. And tonight we are so thrilled you're here to join us for this amazing webinar. We are joined by Jeantel Camissa-Markel, who's the principal and founder, CEO of Camissa-Markel, which is a fabulous immigration attorney law firm here in New York City. Tonight, as you all know, we are going to be discussing hot topics from policy shifts and real-time updates for immigration in the United States in 2025. I would like to also let you know that we will be holding another of these events on June 23, where you'll be able to ask all of your questions. Tonight, however, first of all, thank you for sending in questions. Those of you who send in questions, super helpful. What we've done is we've gone through and selected 6 or so questions from the number that came to us, and they're the ones we'll answer at the end of this. So we're not going to do like an open forum Q&A for this one. However, we will be answering the 6 most commonly asked questions. But like I said, on June 23, keep an eye out for the next one of these webinars. And at that one, we'll have a bit more of an open forum. So if you have questions from tonight, or questions that were not answered by tonight, or questions that have been spawned from tonight's chat, let us know. And on June 23, you'll have a chance to answer them. But for now, please virtually welcome Jeantel Camissa-Markel. Thank you so much, Jeantel.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for having me. I know that there's a lot going on in US immigration right now, so I think it's very timely and it feels good to be able to hopefully tonight calm some people's nerves around a lot of the media that's out there. I am going to share my screen. Let me see if I can seamlessly do that. How does that? Can you see that?
Perfect. Sure can.
And if I then, okay, great. You did introduce us. I wanted to just reiterate that tonight, that our firm, Camissa-Markel, predominantly practices business immigration. We do some family immigration, whereby if someone marries a US citizen or a permanent resident, and we do their green cards that way, but predominantly business immigration. We don't do asylum and deportation cases. So therefore tonight, we're not going to be covering situations with respect to the end of temporary protected status, that's TPS, for Venezuelans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. We're not going to be dealing with people that are here, illegal immigrants that are being picked up and detained. We're going to be more focusing on the updates that affect what I believe is our predominant audience tonight, which is with respect to visas, what's happening with visas, what's happening with green cards, citizenship. Actually, I think I have a slide with what we're going to be covering. Yes, so I think there's been a lot of media about visitors coming into the US and other Australians. They're hearing news and on social media about people being either refused entry or they're being detained and then sent back home. So I want to give some light around that. Social media vetting, that's another big hot topic, and that crosses multiple factors. It crosses over these people that are being refused or detained entry. It crosses over at visa appointments. It's really important. Even with respect to if you have a visa petition that's getting filed with USCIS, if you're not an E3 and making a visa application at a consulate, but you're filing an H1B or an O1 petition, you want to make sure your social media is consistent with your visa history, and we'll cover that. Student visas, it's a hot topic right now, especially last week and the week before, with Trump revoking SEVIS for Harvard students and then stopping appointments for Fs and Js and Ms. We'll cover that. What do you do? What should you do if you're a student that's affected or thinking about coming in to study in the United States? Updates to visas and green cards. In this section, we're going to talk about, there are a lot of questions about E3s as well. We will touch on E3s. We're also going to touch on O's and H's, just the needs to know tonight. There's so much to cover, so we're going to cover the needs to know. And then on the 23rd, we can dive more in depth in some things. Registration. That was when Trump announced that everyone here has to be registered. And if you're here more than 30 days and you're over the age of 14, there was a little bit of confusion about who that is. We won't go into that too long, but we'll just clarify it for people so that people feel like they understand it. There is what's happening at consulates, interviews, so forth. This also pertains to, there were some questions about E3 renewals. So we'll go into what's happening at consulates for renewals, as well as just generally visa appointments. And so, yeah, here we go, visa renewals. And then citizenship interview. So there has been some media about the fact that people have their citizenship interview, they show up for their citizenship interview, think they're going to become a US citizen, and instead are being arrested and then detained with the risk of deportation. And so I know I had clients who have their citizenship interview coming up this week and next week that were calling me off the hook last week with, oh my gosh, is that me? Or one was their wife and saying, is that going to be my husband? He can't, maybe you better not go next week. That's not the case. We're going to give some clarity around that. And when does that happen and how does that happen? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, it's worth sort of acknowledging the fact that there is a lot of swirl and noise in the media at the moment about traveling into the United States. It's causing a lot of, as you said, panic and alarm with people, justifiably so, because there's a lot of stuff out there. But it's not only people coming into the United States, it's those of us who are already here who are leaving and wanting to come back. So I'd love to just start with your take on, here you go, some of these headlines we've had and what your actual inside track attorney view is on these.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing. I think everybody's listening to the media. I want to just clarify that people that are getting detained and then sent back, this has been happening. This has always been happening. It's not new and just under the Trump administration. I do think that there's probably a little bit more social media vetting under this administration that could be leading to more people potentially being detained, but it's never, so you see these headlines, right? Like the most recent one was this wife, this Australian woman who had a US citizen military husband. She was coming in to visit him and she was detained at the Honolulu airport and then ultimately sent back to Australia. We subsequently know that she did have a suitcase full of clothes. She was also traveling here frequently. She had deleted, I think, over 1,000 text messages between her and her husband. She, in her interview, couldn't remember the date that they got married. So there was a lot of sort of, things that initially was not disclosed when the media, put this story out. But what a lot of people are seeing is the media articles, and then they're panicking and saying, is this going to be me? And I think what's really important is that denial, if you're denied entry into the United States, it's not usually a mystery. And in fact, if you are denied entry, or if you put into secondary inspection and they start questioning you, what happens is they start to do a transcript of all the questions asked and what your answers are. And then at the end of that, you can request, they should give it to you. And if they don't, you should absolutely request it, a copy of that transcript if you are going to be sent back, because that transcript necessarily needs to have the section of law under which you were denied entry or deported. So that then you can give that to your immigration attorney, and the immigration attorney can look at what exactly it was, which section of the law they refused you entry under. So then that attorney can also help you strategize your re-entry to know what arguments to make. But generally, what I'd like people to know is that it's quite safe. People are saying, oh, my mum is coming to visit, maybe she shouldn't come right now, or I want to travel. We had a big client of ours who's an advertising agency. We have a couple of advertising agency actually, and they were concerned with the Cannes Lion Awards are coming up June 16th to the 20th, and a lot of them have said, oh, we're just not sure if our people on visas should even go. Maybe they won't be able to get back in. So there's really, like, even people that are here on visas are afraid to travel, afraid that they may not be able to get back in. Even people with green cards thinking, oh, maybe I'm not going to be able to get back in. There is always usually an underlying reason when people are not let back in. And these are I've listed here the main reasons. So there are obvious ones, right? If you've ever overstayed a visa or a nesta, okay, sure, that's obvious. You're not going to travel in that instance. Unlawful presence in the United States, again, you're not going to risk traveling in that instance. Unauthorized employment. This is one where people think that maybe they can get away with this. So this is if frequently this happens when people are traveling in on ESTA. They're coming in and back and forth very frequently. And if you're spending a lot of time here, the immigration officer might think you're working here. Because remember, Americans only get 2 weeks holiday a year. So now if you're coming in multiple times a year for long periods, immigration officers thinking, well, do you not have a job back home? And what are you doing here? Maybe you're working. And this is the situation. This one is one of the predominant ones that triggers the phone searches and the social media searches and the device searches, because they're looking for evidence that you might be working illegally in the United States. And we'll touch on these phone searches, in a moment, but typically that happens it most commonly happens when people are entering and exiting on visa waiver.
Understand.
If you've ever been convicted, arrested, cited, charged with an offense or a DUI, I'm going to delve into this in a little bit more detail because this is a very common one that people get refused entry under, especially if you've gotten your visa, you're here, and then you get arrested for something, and that case is not closed yet. That can cause you to not be able to be let back in. Or if you have a DUI is really important. I'm going to delve into that in a little bit more detail. If you have been, so this is another one that's more common now than ever before. If you're doing any activity that could be considered to attempt to overthrow the US government or support terrorism, or is anti-American, or also there was also something that they said that's anti-Semitic, then because that could be attempting to overthrow the US government or create a social unrest, that is a criteria that they can deny you entry under. And that's also a prompt for checking your social media. So if they see any social media activity, we're going to be talking a lot about social media because a lot of these visa delays that are happening is because there's more vetting of social media. And these are the things they're looking for. Anti-American, people that are protesting, anyone that their visa, social media does not align with their visa history. So that's why I keep harping on social media. If you have ever obtained your green card or your visa through fraud or misrepresentation or a false statement, that can lead you to being denied entry. So you want to make sure if you obtained your green card through marriage to a US citizen that you really were married for bona fide reasons. Maybe you carry evidence of the bona fides with you just to make sure. This next one is not as common right now. This is more if you're traveling in on ESTA that you need to get a B visa. If you've traveled to any of these countries, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, North Korea. Right now, the questions that we're seeing get asked are, have you traveled to Gaza and the West Bank? So that's something that people should be conscious of. And then frequent travel. Again, frequent travel to the United States, especially if you're on ESTA. If you're on a visa, it makes sense, right? You're coming in because you work here, you have a visa to be here. But if you're coming in on ESTA or a B2, they can deny you for the frequent travel leads to them thinking either you could be working here with not authorized and not with the right visa, or that you might have immigrant intent. So let's go back to the woman who was denied entry. She had a US citizen husband and she was coming here frequently. And so immediately, before we knew the additional details, I think ultimately she was denied on fraud and misrepresentation. And I have not seen her transcript, so I can't say for sure. This is just from outside view as an immigration lawyer with knowledge. But my first instinct was, okay, they thought she had immigrant intent because she has a US citizen husband here and she's coming in on ESTA. So there might be and a bag full of clothes. So they might have been thinking she was going to come and stay and not leave. I'm going to delve a little bit into this, the three most common. These are the three. We have thousands of clients, Eddie, like hundreds and hundreds. So, and we've only had 3 that have been denied entry this year in 2025. And that might sound like a lot, but it's pretty common every year. So this is not just common to the Trump administration. And they would have been denied under any administration for the reason they got denied, because the law requires it. So the first one is criminal inadmissibility. If you have a crime involving moral turpitude, That's a bit obvious, right? But crimes involving moral turpitude are often intent crimes. So there's the obvious ones: murder, rape, domestic violence. Then there's ones that are not as obvious. So theft, even though most people should know that that's a crime involving moral turpitude, but theft is one, and including theft of services. So we had a situation where someone got out of a cab, did not pay the cab driver, and they got charged with theft of services because they had the intent to not pay that cab driver. So just silly little things like that. Controlled substance is a huge one. And I just want to remind people that marijuana is illegal federally in the United States, meaning that an admission is the same for immigration purposes, is the same as a conviction. So if you admit to an immigration officer upon entry to the United States or at a visa interview that you've ever smoked marijuana, taken any cannabis-related products at all, you are immediately inadmissible to the United States under the law. And you would have to go through a whole waiver process to overcome that inadmissibility, and that can take up to 8 months or more. So just remember that. Controlled substance as well, you really, if it's a more serious drug, can be even more problematic. We had a client who, in this instance, these are the three that I was saying I had the client that got refused entry, had gone to Coachella, had got charged with possession of LSD, and but the case was still open and he thought it was going to get dismissed. He then traveled on a holiday, and on re-entry and with his new spouse, actually it was kind of a honeymoon. And then when he came back in, he was refused entry because that case had not been closed out. The case had not been dismissed yet. So he was refused entry. And, imagine you're the bride coming back on your honeymoon and your husband's now not let back in and is shipped back to Australia. We ultimately have gotten him back into the country. That's fine because the charges were dismissed. But he didn't have to go through a waiver because the charges were dismissed. So it didn't take 8 months. It took close to maybe I would say 5 weeks. And we now have him back in the US. But just be cautious. Just don't take drugs is the moral of the story there. DUI is another big one. What people don't know, and I want everyone to listen to this very closely because it affects everyone, whether you have a green card, you have a visa, unless you're a citizen, they're not. But if you have a DUI and you're here on a visa, it automatically revokes your visa and you don't know about that. They don't tell you. So then you go and travel internationally, and when you find out is when you're coming back from your international trip and the visa officer and the immigration officer says, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, we can't let you in today because your visa's been revoked." And you go, "Why has my visa been revoked?" "Don't know, can't tell you." Okay. And then you go away and then you call your immigration lawyer and you go, "I don't know why I was denied entry, blah, blah, blah." And the immigration officer asks you a plethora of questions, including like, "Do you have a DUI?" "Oh, yes, I do. I just got a DUI and last year," or it could even be longer ago. Usually it's after the last visa because you've dealt with it since you got the last visa. But if you've had it since the last visa, your visa gets revoked. So what happens there is you'll be let back in as long as the DUI is just one and not 2 DUIs where you've caused bodily harm to someone. If that's the situation, then it's much worse. But if it's a simple DUI, which no one should be drinking and driving, right? Like we grew up with all those ads. But if it does happen, then you will need to go back to a US consulate outside the US, and you have to do another visa application, and the consulate will send you to a panel physician to get a medical done. The panel physician will have to confirm that you're not a habitual drunkard. And then once they confirm that and notify the consulate that they don't deem you to be a habitual drunkard, the consulate will reissue a new visa for you, and then you can come back. So typically, and this is for people that when they get their visas issued, right? Normally you go to you book your appointment, you go to the consulate appointment, you leave your passport there, you get your passport back in about a week. But if you have a DUI and you have to go see the panel physician, you can anticipate it's going to take 3 to 4 weeks. And actually, this is going to come up a little bit later as what we're seeing with consulates. Currently, we're actually seeing consulates take even a bit longer than that if you have a previous DUI, and we're seeing previous DUIs resurface as an issue at current visa appointments. So if you have a DUI, make sure you tell your immigration lawyer about this because you want to prepare in advance before you go to your visa interview and know what to expect and anticipate. And then, So yeah, so we did have our client who he works for one of the big 4 accounting firms, went on vacation, was denied entry, sent back. We were able to get him the new visa. He was gone about 3 weeks and was able to re-enter. Suspicion of unauthorized work. This is the other one where this is the most common one where people are like, I don't even know what I did. Usually it's because you've been coming in and out too frequently on ESTA. They suspect that you're working, they check your phones, or they think you have immigrant intent because you're coming here too much and spending too much time here.
I mean,
I'll put these sections here, even though it's too much information, but it's because these are the sections that they're the most frequent. You know how I said you get a transcript and it will say the section under which you were denied entry? It kind of looks like that. It'll look like INA 212A7, which is you came in with the wrong visa, meaning they suspect you're working and you need a work visa. That's easy to overcome. And immigrant intent is a little bit harder to overcome. So, but usually if you're denied under those 2 categories, you can go back, get a visa and re-enter, and a lawyer can strategize, create a strategy for you.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And I think we'll get more to immigrant intent either today or another day, but it's worth noting that's a sort of a important thing to underline. We're talking about people who've been refused entry, which is obviously not ideal, but something that I think causes anxiety for a lot of people is the moment of, you fly into LAX and then you get detained and pulled into secondary questioning, whatever it's called. What causes that? What are some of the triggers that lead to that moment where the person pulls you aside and you get more questions?
Yeah, so I think this is relevant mostly, people coming in on visas are not as likely to get pulled aside into secondary inspection. The ones that are on visas that might is if you're here on a work visa, but you've had a prolonged absence outside of the US, then they might think, oh, you're coming back, but wait, you've had this visa. Are you not working for this company in the US anymore because you've just been gone for 3 months? Remember, again, Americans only get 2 weeks holiday. So if you've been gone for a while and you're coming back in, that might be a bit of a red flag if you're on a visa. But generally people on visas don't get questioned as much as people that are coming in on visa waiver or on a tourist visa. And so this is relevant, I think, to our audience when you've got family members visiting. I know I had my dad and my sister come and surprised me a couple of weeks ago. And my dad is just always a culprit for being like, yeah, I've got a US citizen daughter with like 4 kids and all my grandkids. And I'm always like, oh my God, this guy's going to get detained because they're going to think he's going to want to come and live here, So the things that you want to avoid what the things that are red flags to an immigration officer are if you've got multiple trips to the US that are long, that could show immigrant intent. If you're coming here and you're spending prolonged periods or if you mention that, oh yeah, I'm doing work, you shouldn't mention work, right? Even if you are coming for work, just say you're coming for meetings. Don't say the word work because work needs a visa. So that's another thing. Also, you're not supposed to be working here remotely. So some people will come and then they're, well, oh yeah, well, how are you supporting yourself while you're in the United States? Well, yeah, I work remote. Wrong answer. That's just like death right there, entry, because you're not supposed to do that in the United States. A relationship with a US citizen or permanent resident, maybe avoid bringing that up. I know that people sometimes say it and it's fine and they get in, but it can lead to them thinking, like I said about my dad, saying I'm coming to visit my US citizen daughter and all their kids and blah, blah, blah. They could think, oh, you're coming in, maybe you're going to want to stay. And particularly if it's a parent visiting and they might think, just prep your parent or sibling that you're not coming to help look after, someone's kids. You're not going to get paid to do that. You're just coming to visit, you're a tourist, you're visiting, you want to spend time, you love Australia. Bring things that you've got that show your ties to home. And that's the next one. If you're coming in frequently and you don't really have many ties back home, like a job, property, relatives, those sorts of things, then that can be problematic.
We're getting a few questions about just if we could drill down ever so slightly on what is considered a long visit, because we're talking about multiple long visits on ESTA. What does that look like?
Yeah, so long visits are if you're spending more time in the US than out of the US. So if you are coming in and you're coming for 2 months and you leave for a month, coming in for 2 months and you leave for a month, that's no good. If you're coming for 2 weeks and then you're gone for 5 months and then you come for another 2 weeks and then you are gone for 2 months and then you come in for a week, that's going to be fine. Or if you have a cadence, right? So some people come in for work meetings and they come in every June and August and February, right? For Fashion Week, let's say.
Sure.
Then they can see your history of all your trips. So if your trips are just seem to be repeating the same history of what you usually do every year, it's not normally a problem. If they see a history of you normally come in for a week or 2 weeks a year, on these certain dates, but now we're seeing you coming in for you came in for 3 months last time. Now you've left. Now you're coming in for another 2 months, and then you left, and now you're coming in again. That's a red flag, right? They're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of bleeds into this next question I had, which is about, do you have any tips for people coming in?
Yeah, so I think just try and keep your trip short, less than 2 weeks. Certainly less than 90 days if you're coming in on Esther. Reason being, they associate holidays with 2 weeks. If you have to come for longer than 2 weeks, make sure you have an itinerary of all the activities that you're going to be doing. Why are you coming in longer than 2 weeks? Oh, because I'm going to go to Florida, I'm going to Disneyland, and I've got long service leave. Like, explain how you're doing this, right? Because in their head, how are you doing it? You mustn't have a job, which means you're at risk of staying here. So mention, I'm on long service leave, and so I have time to go, but then I have to go back. Unfortunately, then I have to go back. Sometimes for the really nervous clients of ours, sometimes we have clients say, oh, my parents are really nervous about coming, or sister or whoever it is. I'll sometimes say book a ticket that's less than 2 weeks because they won't ask many questions. They'll enter you for the 90 days regardless. You can always extend your stay after you're here. So if you're really nervous about getting questioned, that's a strategy you could use. Again, don't mention work. Don't. One tip is if you have been coming frequently, carry evidence of your job abroad to show that you're not going to be staying here. And then again, I always say don't offer up too much information, especially if you've got any relationships here or family here that could lead to them thinking you've got immigrant intent. I think what's really important too to know is that if you're denied entry even if you're denied entry on a visa, if you're denied entry on Esther or a visa, you're banned from ever using Esther again. So you want to try and avoid that. I get that question all the time. People say, oh yeah, but it was like so long ago. And then I got a visa after that. So, but now my visa's expired. So can I use Esther again now? Typically the answer is still no. Once you've been denied an Esther, you're pretty much going to be denied, the Esther going forward and need a visa.
So, okay, so let's imagine what a lot of people consider to be sort of the scary part. You are detained at an airport or a point of entry. They pull you aside. What are your rights in that situation? And I mean, they can do that, right? Like, what does that look like legally, that whole procedure?
Yep, you can be searched. Absolutely, they can search your phone and your devices. People think, oh, I'm not going to ask any questions until I have a lawyer. They're not going to give you a lawyer. So answer the questions, just be conscious of what you're saying, because that's going to be on a transcript for everybody to see, including consulates later when you try to reapply for a visa. I think what the key thing and the golden thing to take away from this webinar tonight is that if you think you're going to be denied entry, you should ask to withdraw your application for entry rather than being deported. Because if you withdraw your application for entry, you haven't been denied entry. You sought to not enter. So it was kind of your choice. You'll still have to answer it, but it's just better when you then later try and get a visa. Again, make sure that you can ask why you're being, if you are detained before, because the reason, so that Honolulu woman, okay, she was detained and put into a prison because they're waiting to put you on the next flight. And if there's no next flight for a day or so, that's where you need to be held somewhere. And the only place you can be held is in a detention facility. Typically, if there's flights, that's why coming in through LAX or JFK, people aren't detained for as long because they're they're waiting until that next flight. Usually it's that same night or next day, next morning, and you're kind of just being held in that secondary inspection space. But if you do get detained off-site, you do have the ability to call your consulate, and you should do that. And then the consulate can call even an immigration attorney to get us involved. Make sure you get the transcript of that denial of entry. That is really key, because that's how a lawyer is going to be able to help you get back into the country. And if you don't get it, this is why you should get it, is because if you don't get it, and then the lawyer says, did you get it? And you say no, they want to know why you got detained to know how to help you get back in. And you can get that transcript after the fact, but you can only do it through a Freedom of Information Act request. It's called a FOIA request. And those can take a year and a half before they give it to you. So so you don't want to be in that situation. So make sure you ask for that. And then once you land back in your home country, make sure you call your immigration lawyer at that point before you start doing anything, so that they can help you strategize, look at the reason why you were detained entry, strategize for your re-entry.
Got it. Something that has come up a lot is, they can search your phone, that's actually happening, right? And what does that look like when they do it? Is it a long process? Is it a short process?
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know we have a lot to cover, but they can. Usually these are triggered though by something that they think, they're not searching everyone's phone. They're not even doing it randomly. It's more, there's something that's triggered. They think, okay, you've been coming in too frequently. We think maybe you're working. And so they're going to search your phone to see, find text messages between you and an employer, or you and even actually I've put that in the bottom there, even between you and a US citizen, or even if you're traveling in with a US citizen and they suspect you're doing something wrong, they can check the US citizen's phone as well. So just be mindful of that. And then you currently, you don't want to then, if you're planning to enter the United States and you have things on your phone or your social media or your devices that you think could be problematic from what we've discussed tonight, including, political remarks and so forth, plan ahead and think about, making those devices friendlier for your admission way in advance, not the day before or the week before you're entering, because if they want to do an advanced search, the advanced search can show them if you've deleted stuff off your phone.
Which reminds me of what we were talking about earlier, this case from the woman from Honolulu.
I think we got intercepted by the government that was like, we don't want you talking about this. No tips for anyone who's coming. And then the audience is like, we're sick of this topic. Let's move to the next topic. Maybe this is our cue.
That was high stakes. I know.
I know. Hopefully others are able to log back in. What are you seeing there? Have people been able to get back in?
I think people coming back in. Yeah. Yeah, we got 208 people back in. So hi, everyone.
No worries.
Sorry about that. So we were just
they're saying scrub this from your devices before you
guys.
enter the United States. No, it's fine. You're allowed to attend immigration webinars, by the way. This will not prevent you from getting into the United States.
Right, let's pick up where we left off, which was around phones. And
social media and vetting, So what are they looking for? They're looking for, have you worked in the United States? If you're on a visa, so this is, there were a few questions for people that are on E3s and they're like, should I not travel right now? You know what, you don't want to have anything on your phone and on your social media that's inconsistent with your visa history. So if you're here as a accountant, you do not want to have all over your social media that you're flipping houses, that you're buying and flipping houses, and you're making all this, so if you do have a side gig or a side hustle, I think it's the right term, talk to your immigration lawyer, because rather than hiding it, there might be legal ways of being able to do it. There are such things as concurrent visas that allow you to do your side hustle together with your main job, as long as your main employer allows you to do that. So yeah, just and that's where we see this sort of come up, is when people have a side hustle or they're doing something different. Maybe they're like sometimes working in a bar or working as a bouncer or working, taking another job. So content producer, these sorts of things. If you produce content and you don't have a visa to do that, that's also can be problematic. So just keep an eye on that, especially because that's easily searchable. Also, we heard of someone that had, and I know this is like a bit taboo, but that had an OnlyFans site, and they're doing facial recognition on that as well. And just as a reminder that in the United States, if you are suspected of prostitution, then they will stop you from entering the United States. And so something like an OnlyFans site or something like that could be problematic there. We had an interesting case where there was someone, and I bring this up just because it's interesting, who was in Australia. In Australia, prostitution's legal. Hang on, wait. Prostitution's illegal, pornography's legal. In the United States, pornography is legal and prostitution's illegal. So it's the reverse, right? So this person was like, oh, so what can I say or not say? And I'm like, yeah, you're in a really tough position here with your OnlyFans and your escorting service. So anyway, I don't think who knows? Anyway, just a good thing to know about. Yeah. If you have these extraneous sites, they can see those. It's protests is the other thing. And I know that a lot of people are like, well, that's just restricting my freedom of speech, and that's a right I have. Or just as a reminder, unless you're a citizen, you don't have that right. So you can choose to either protest and risk your ability to enter the United States or re-enter the United States or get a visa, or you could just not do that in the current climate to protect your ability to travel freely and get a visa. And I know that is really frustrating to some people that do like to voice their opinions. But in this climate, I just sort of say, look, it's a choice that you make. And like, if you want to protest, then you've got to deal with the risks associated with that. Yeah. Again, just bringing up the marijuana thing. So the reason I bring this up is because someone got denied entry because it was on their phone. Their phone got searched. They were here on an L visa, which is one of the most like safe visas to be on, right? Because you're allowed to have an intent on that. You're allowed to come back and forth. You're allowed to spend periods of time outside the US. If there's got to be a safe visa, the L is one of the safest. So this person came in. There was cause for them to. She must have said something. There's cause for them to look at her phone, and there were photos of her in Colorado at a dispensary. And they're like, what's this? Oh, yeah, I went to the dispensary in Colorado. It's legal there. Oh, did you buy anything? And did you take anything? Oh, yes, I bought some gummies and I bought this and that. Yeah, and I used it there, recreational. It's legal there. They're like, yeah, but it's illegal federally. Sorry, you're getting back on the next plane, and off you go. And then that person had to get a waiver. It took 8 months before they could get back into the United States. And L visas are for multinational managers and executives. So this is a very high-level individual at their company. So it didn't look good. So just again, remember, don't have even photos of this stuff. Don't post photos of, I was saying earlier to someone, I was in New Orleans and there was this guy who had a really cool jacket. As you see, I loved cool jackets. And I said to him, I took a photo of him from the back. I said, oh, can I take a photo of your jacket's so cool. But it had sort of like weed prongs on the, what do you call it? The elbow patches. Oh, yeah. And then like other cool stuff. Anyway, so the other day I was thinking, if I was here on a visa, could they think that then I'm like pro marijuana? Could that be problematic? Right. So just be conscious of anything that you've got on your social media, even photos that could lead to them to go,
They give them a reason to,
Yeah. And then the other thing, like I already said, just don't mass delete right before a flight or right before a visa interview either. Try and just don't post things from now and going forward, and try to cull early on if you need to.
Have to feel like it's, interesting. And then I think we have, this is just interesting.
Oh, yeah, this is just interesting. Sorry, I cut you off. I just wanted to speed up because I know we lost a bit of time. And we can add maybe 10 minutes if people are okay with that, but I'll try and speed through so that people, in case they do have to go off to things, we don't go over time. But just, there was another one, USCIS adopted, this is just in April, they said the US has adopted social media vetting for anti-Americanism. Anything that's anti-Semitic, that is supporting anti-Semitic terrorism or anti-American activity can be considered a negative factor. So going back to the protests and, and we're just seeing that, barrel through, and it's like a domino effect with the revoking of the visas for the Harvard students, and the Columbia students are being targeted for their anti-American activity.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to the next point, which is, I mean, most of the social media vetting stuff we're hearing is about student visas, right? Which are J's, M's, and F's.
Yes.
What's your take on what is happening with student visas right now?
So I think that, look, I think there is this whole anti-American thing with respect to the social media vetting, anti-Semitism, all of these sorts of things. Trump has requested for information on students at these schools that have participated in these protests, and the schools don't want to give it. So the current administration is trying to make it difficult for these schools. And what's the best way of making it difficult is by limiting funding, by restricting grants that are giving to the schools. And then the other way that a lot of these schools are subsidized are by international students. And so what better way than to limit student visas? And, at first, 2 weeks ago, he revoked the SEVIS for international students at Harvard. That got stopped pretty quickly, as we expected. We expected a court order to intervene and halt that. It happened even faster than what immigration lawyers expected. By the next day, that was halted. So Harvard students can resume being here, entering the United States. We've had some Harvard students that have subsequently gotten their visas and entered the United States. No issues whatsoever. So if you are a Harvard student, you're abroad, and you need to enter right now, you should be able to enter without problems. The people that are affected right now, and I think this will resolve itself too, but we're right in the middle of when people are being affected, and this is with a lot of the proclamations and executive orders, is that a lot of them do get, a temporary restraining order against them or squashed by the courts, but people get caught up in that interim period. And that's where we are with the revocation of interviews right now for Fs and Js and Ms. So there was a directive that got leaked last week that was that the consulates should stop interviewing people, stop issuing interviews for anyone that needs an F1, J1, or M1. People that are already booked for an interview can still go. So we have someone going for their F visa interview on Friday. We'll see how that goes. We can update on that. But if you need an F appointment right now, you're not able to get one, because they've said any available appointments you had that weren't already booked, take them off your booking systems and don't add any new ones right now. They have said that this is because they want to expand their social media vetting. And I do think that these visa, I've got here on the next slide, users take up, I've talked all about that. SEVIS, the next slide. Yeah, so if you've got an F1 interview, still attend it. But just students, international students make up $44 billion of the US economy in the monies they pay to the US universities. So these will most certainly resume. And what I actually predict happening is that when they do resume, because people can't book their visa appointment right now, school starts in August. So everyone's going to need, and when it does resume, there's going to be a flood of interviews for Fs. And I actually think that what the government might even do, pardon me, because Trump did say on Friday night, don't worry, they'll be okay, is they might prioritize F appointments, which they've done in the past. And what that means is that anyone that needs an appointment for other visa categories might find, oh my gosh, we have tech problems tonight, coughing, I don't know what I swallowed, some stuff. But let me get that out. All right, I think I'm good now. If you need other visa categories, I think that we're going to see a shortage of visa interviews available for other categories. So you might want to anticipate that. If you do need a visa interview for a different visa category right now, now's the time to book it, because I do think that we're going to see July and August get really flooded. The consulates get flooded with Fs once those appointments when you can, they resume the
Mm.
ability to book those appointments.
Mm. Mm.
So, yep, that's what I said there.
Yeah. And then, okay, so that's the student visas, which obviously have been in the news a lot. What about other visa categories?
Perfect. Yep. So I'm going to rush through these and just give the updates that I think are critical and that people need to know about. O1s. We used to have a reciprocity fee that it was like $190. That's been eliminated. But what they've done instead is they've limited the O1 visa stamp that goes into your passport to 2 years validity. Used to be 3 years validity. So the visa petition, so the approval notice you get from USCIS is still valid for 3 years, but the visa sticker that they put in your passport is only valid for 2 for O1s now. For H1Bs, what we're seeing is they've created a visa reciprocity fee that was not there before and increased it actually to $1,695 for the primary and the dependents. So while E3 visa, people that are here, you might be just getting an H1B without a different visa beforehand. I know that a lot of people that are here on E3s that are switching to the green card process think about switching to an H1B. Just don't be surprised when you go to the consulate to get that H1B visa put in your passport when they say, okay, yep, now you've got to pay us $1,695 for us to put this sticker in your passport. And if you've got kids and a spouse, it's going to be, times that per dependent that is also getting that dependent visa. The other interesting thing we saw was a RFE for biometrics for an H1B. We had someone filed a petition for an H1B and they said, we want this person to go get fingerprinting. It's not all the time, but we did see it. And so if you see that, you're not the only one. We've seen it.
And RFE is request further evidence or something?
Oh, yes, request for more evidence. Correct. Okay. Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. I wanted to put this in just because when you and I did our update in what to expect under the Trump administration in November, we said that, under the previous administration, we saw an attack on the H1Bs, we saw an attack on prevailing wages, which affected E3s. And there was a question that came through for tonight's webinar where someone said, what about prevailing wages? Are we seeing anything there? We have not seen anything there yet. Yeah. So prevailing wages for H's and E3s right now, I don't want to speak too soon, but right now, that's not the focus. It seems like these student visas seem to be the focus at the moment.
Yeah. Just quickly, you mentioned the petition versus sticker timelines. Can you talk about that difference for a moment?
Oh, yeah. So the petition is the visa, for the O's, you have to submit a big petition, unlike the E3s where you can just go and apply at the consulate. You have to submit a petition to USCIS first, with a whole load of documents of how you're extraordinary and how you meet the criteria. USCIS adjudicates that. That's USCIS in the US. They then say, okay, yes, you qualify, and then they give you an approval notice. And that approval notice can be for up to 3 years.
Okay.
Now, when you go to the consulate, that's Department of State, they've been directed that the visa sticker that they can put in your passport can only be valid for 2 years, even if your petition's valid for 3. So what that means is that you'll come in, you can travel internationally on your O1 sticker for 2 years. When you get to the end of that 2 years, you'll have to do one of 2 things. Either you'll go to the consulate and get another O1 based on your current approval notice, but it'll only be for another year. Or what we're seeing is clients go, well, I'm only going to get now that visa. I've got to go there anyway, and I'm only going to get a year. So why don't I just renew my O1 early? May as well renew it early, and then I'll get it for 2 years. So we're seeing it make people decide to renew their O1 after 2 years instead of 3, which then leads to, I think now is the time. If you're on an O1, now's the time to talk to your immigration attorney to see if there's any other visa categories that might be more suitable to you. And especially if it's going to be 2 years, could you get away with what you're doing now on your O1, on an E3? Do you need the benefits of an O1 that an O1 affords, that the E3 doesn't afford, to remain on the O1, or should you be switching? So that's a discussion to be had.
You mentioned briefly the consulate, and that's obviously the Department of State. Is there anything else we're seeing with consulates and the way they're handling visas right now?
Yep, and sorry, I did jump ahead of you with the slide. So this this is great. We are seeing a few things, and this is where, you know, a lot of questions with respect to E3 renewals. So all of this information pertains to E3, not only E3 renewals, but anyone that's going to get a visa at a US consulate abroad. We know that then the way that people do apply for E3s is often through this method of applying for the appointment abroad. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that consulates are now requiring, and if you haven't started your renewal yet, you won't know this, but you should know that your DS-160 has to be submitted at least 2 business days before your appointment. So that means if you have an appointment on a Monday, it needs to be submitted by the previous Wednesday, not Friday, because that's not 2 business days, and they will send you away. There are consulates that will send you away if your DS-160 was not submitted far enough in advance. And the reason being comes all back to this whole social media vetting thing that the current administration is putting into place. So they want consulates to review people's DS-160s and ahead of the visa appointments, which was happening before as well, but I think in more depth now. The other thing that we're seeing is that they want your DS-160 confirmation number to match your appointment confirmation. So that's very important. They'll turn you away if those numbers don't match. We're seeing limited availability. Access, you know, typically we tell clients, yes, you can get an E3. You don't have to go back to Australia to get your E3 visa. You just any consulate outside the United States. And typically most consulates will process E3s. We're currently seeing there are some that are just not booking third country nationals or limiting access, and Paris is one of those. So if you were thinking of going to Paris over the summer and doing your renewal there, I think you'll end up once you pay your fee, it's going to end up getting eaten up. So maybe that's a little hot tip there. Maybe avoid Paris, but we should see that change. Paris used to be a really popular place to go do your visa, and we send so many people there to do their E3s. And things that consulates change all the time. So people are always like, oh, but 2 years ago it was fine there, you know, or even last year it was fine there. What happens at the consulates changes weekly, let alone monthly and annually, right? So don't always assume that if you've been there before that it's going to be fine again. We're also seeing some weird questions. The consulates, just as a reminder, the consulates change over staff every couple of years, and sometimes the staff aren't fully trained. So we had someone get asked, why is your name not on your LCA? Well, your name doesn't go on the LCA, the employer's name does, but the beneficiary's name's never on there. DS-160, oh, we need your long printout before they got in. No, you don't. And if you have filled in a DS-160, you will know it says on the top and the bottom of it in big bold letters, do not take this to your interview. Luckily, these 2 people were people that have been to their interviews before and knew that their name's never been on an LCA. And so they were able to say, look, I don't think my name does go on an LCA. Can you check this? But if they didn't know that, they would have got sent away, go book another appointment, come back. We would have had to get involved with the consulate and say, your consulate officer asked this weird question that doesn't even make sense. But they would have been stuck there for a few weeks, right? To then get another appointment, go back, you know. So just be aware, be prepped really before you go to your visa interview. Make sure you're prepped, so that and speak to your immigration lawyer. What are, you know, other clients getting asked? What questions are they getting asked, so that you know how to answer these questions if you get them, so that you don't delay or, you know, your process or get stuck there. And then again, I mentioned this earlier, but we're seeing DUIs, even old DUIs, resurface and make visa issuances take a bit longer. So I always recommend, if you've had any criminal offence in the past, including a DUI, just get a fresh police certificate issued so that you have that with you, because if they ask you for it, then you're just delaying, right? You leave, then you got to go get that. You got to wait to get it. Then you got to submit it to the consulate. Whereas if you have it there, you have it with you. You might not need it, but if you do, and then it's resolved there, and then it's going to make your process much faster.
Yeah. The DS-160, what is that?
Yep. DS-160 is the form that you fill out to get your visa interview. It looks like this. The one, I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's red bar. It's got your photo on it. To book a visa appointment and to go to a visa appointment, you need it filled out, and it's a long form. And then once you submit it, it auto-generates just a single page with a barcode on it and this confirmation number. You'll see here, it's highlighted in yellow. And so this is the appointment confirmation. Typically for Australia, it looks like this. You want these two numbers to match. When I said that the numbers have to match, these are the two numbers that need to match.
Thank you. So we've done ESTA, which is a visa waiver. We've done a few of the visas, not in great depth, but then green cards, that's the next one. So
Yeah.
what are we looking at the moment?
Looking at, I know I'm trying to speed through this. So what are we seeing? Marriage-based green cards. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and for 20 years, marriage-based green cards always had a green card interview, without doubt. They were never waived. Then we saw COVID happen. We saw interviews because of the lack of availability of interviews. We saw marriage-based green cards take so long to process. And so then what we saw was the government exercise its right to waive the green card interview for marriage-based applicants. And we then, for the last, I would say 4 years, we have seen if we submit bona fides of the marriage with the filing of the petition, which we now do routinely, we've seen those applicants not even get scheduled for a green card interview at all. Now we're continuing to, submit the cases with the bona fides of marriage. What that means is evidence that you are married, like joint tax returns and photos and evidence of bills with both names on it and all of those kinds of documents. But we've started to see the marriage-based interviews resume. So you brought this up, you and I, Eddie, at what to expect under the Trump administration. And we did say we think that green card interviews for every category are probably going to come back. So we're seeing them already for marriage-based green card interviews. Right. We haven't seen them yet for employment-based interviews, but I think it's only a matter of time, because this is one thing that he did implement under his last administration. We're starting to see it trickle back. The other thing we're seeing at the marriage-based interviews is questions that are typically a Stokes type interview question. So normally at a green card interview, the questions are just what's on the paperwork that you've already submitted, and not like, what side of the bed do you sleep on? When you walk into the room, where is the light switch located? Those questions are usually reserved for what's called a Stokes interview, and most people don't get to a Stokes interview. Stokes interview is when they don't believe you in their first interview and they call you back and they separate the couple and ask these, more in-depth questions. We did have a couple recently go to their green card interview, and they were asked to show their apartment key. And then the officer wanted to check that each of their apartment keys matched. So we thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Funnily, if that was me, I would have failed that interview, because I don't even carry an apartment key, because there's always someone at home. When I get home, I don't even take my keys with me anymore. So
it was dumbfounded them.
Yeah. So just take your apartment keys and make sure they match if you're going to a green card interview. There's severe. So under the employment-based green card, we did get some questions on this, and what are we seeing? We are seeing severe backlogs, especially with perm-based green card cases. Perm is a labor certification process, and the people going through that know what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to go through it now. We'll have a separate, I think we can do an in-depth session, Eddie. We were thinking of doing some advanced topic sessions. We can do that all around green cards. But for the people that are in this process, they know who they are. Yes, these EB2 and EB3s are severely backlogged. There was, during the pandemic, people weren't able to get green cards. So then we had lots of green cards available, and then green cards went quickly. Now more and more people have applied for green cards, and so we're seeing the backlog again. What that means is that these green card categories are taking about 4 years currently. So if you're on an E3, and I've always said you can transition from an E3 to a green card, you do not need to switch to an H1B. You just need to be conscious of your renewals and so forth. It just makes it, now you've got more renewals to deal with at different points in the green card process that can just make it a little bit trickier. So before, where, there were limited reasons why you might switch to an H1B, you might now enter the H1B lottery in March this year, just to help with the process of transitioning to a green card with respect to number of E3 renewals you might need to do along the process. So certainly if you're in an E3 and you're planning to pursue the green card process, broach this topic of should I switch to an H1B or not with your immigration attorney.
Yeah. Okay, so that's green cards. I mean, before we go to some of the questions, should we just, again, we're going to do more in-depth topic sort of discussions at another point, but should we just touch on citizenship being the last, so to speak?
Yeah, this is our last slide, I think, maybe. Right, so there's like I said earlier, someone had, in the news, there was someone was going to their citizenship interview, instead of getting their citizenship, they were getting detained and deported. So as we looked into that, there's always a reason, right? So we had clients going, oh my God, I'm not going to go. I shouldn't go to my citizenship appointment. Or other people saying, citizenship's really risky right now. I should not apply, right? I don't want to discourage people from filing for citizenship because citizenship is actually the safest status to be in, but it's also the riskiest thing to apply for. Yes, it is true that you can be here on a green card for 30 years and then suddenly apply for citizenship and then suddenly be getting deported if there are risk factors involved. This person here, they got their green card through marriage. When you get your green card through marriage and you are issued your green card, if you get your green card in less than 2 years from the date you got married, then you get a conditional green card. And that's valid for 2 years. And then you are obligated to file this 751, which you see on the screen, which is to remove the conditions on your green card to get your 10-year green card. If you do not file that, you get put into removal proceedings. So this person never filed their 751, definitely would not have used an immigration lawyer if they did have a terrible one, because if this person did, so what happens is people look at the citizenship form and they go, oh, this is really easy form. I can do this by myself. But in fact, if you have a situation like this, where they never filed their 751, if they had an attorney would have said, where's your, okay, I see this green card, but this was your 2-year green card. Where's your 10-year one? Oh, I don't have that. Why don't you have that? I don't know. I just didn't. Okay. So did you file a 751? No, I didn't. Oh, shit. You probably oops, did I curse? We can edit that out. You probably, in removal proceedings right now, and you absolutely should not file for citizenship. We should clean that up before we go on to citizenship. So, so these are the things that since you got your green card, and even before your green card, this can come back up at your citizenship interview and prevent you from becoming a citizen and or get you deported. Convictions, controlled substances is a huge one. If you've got your green card and then you get charged with a controlled substance charge, do not file for citizenship. Talk to your immigration lawyer, because you could probably remain here for forever on your green card, but you apply for citizenship and you're getting deported, right? So definitely something you want to talk to your immigration lawyer about. This is an important one. Failure to pay taxes or child support. So if you've gotten divorced and you're not paying your child support, you can go to your citizenship interview and you think it's fine because it's an easy form, and next thing you know, you're getting deported. Fraud, right? So if you got your visa, your green card, on a fraudulent ground, sometimes people will file as an unmarried son or daughter, but they were really married, and that comes out to light, and then they're like, oh, you should never have got this green card, we're taking it away from you, and now you're getting deported. Just so anything that is a ground of inadmissibility can stop you from becoming a citizen and get you deported instead of becoming a citizen. But I do have one piece of positive information before we switch to questions, because I want to end on a positive note. In New York City, and sorry for the people like outside of New York that are watching this, but a lot of the cities outside of New York do same-day oath ceremonies. But in New York City, historically, it's always been that you go to your citizenship interview and you pass your interview, hopefully, and then you have to wait about a month before you actually have your oath ceremony, which is the day you become a citizen, which is when you get your certificate, and then we can do an in-depth session about citizenship and what that means. But that was taking about a month. We have seen, and it depends on the day of the week, but we have seen people go to their citizenship interview and the immigration officer say, do you have time today to stay and get sworn in today? And if you do, and they're doing it that day, they will swear people in the same day. So that has been a really awesome update. And they said that the current administration is trying to create efficiencies, which is great. It saves on administration costs, right? Like they don't have to issue another appointment. They don't have to schedule that it's not at the courthouse. They just do it in the immigration building. So it saves on resources and efficiency. And then that person just knows when they can now go get their US passport, so that it's easier for them when they have to do future international travel too.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, there's been a lot of questions coming in, and I just want to remind people.
I'm not going to cover that registration. You know what? I do want to cover this registration requirement. One thing. This thing came up about everyone in the US that's been here more than 30 days has to register. Probably everybody that is watching this is already registered. The people that need to pay attention is anyone that has a child that when you last entered the United States, that child was under the age of 14. If your child has subsequently turned 14 in the US, that's who you have to register. If you're here 30 days after that child's birthday, you either have to travel internationally and come back in, so they get a new I-94 and they'll get fingerprinted when they come back in, or you have to file this G325R. So that's who, if you're listening and you have a kid, that's about to turn 14, this is really important, right? If you don't register your child or travel and come back within 30 days of your child's 14th birthday, then the penalties are that it's a misdemeanor. So now you're going to have a conviction, a fine of up to $5,000 and or imprisonment. How does this play out in real life? Has this actually happened? Have people been, prosecuted? So there was a judge in Louisiana where someone did get charged with a misdemeanor here, but they threw out the case saying that the people didn't know they had to be registered. And in that court, they said there needed to be knowledge of the requirement to register. So now you're all going, well, why'd you tell us? Because we just didn't want to know. But the reason I'm telling you is because those people still had to go through court proceedings, right? And that's costly, time-consuming, stressful. So if you just register your child or travel within 30 days of their 14th birthday, you're not going to get any misdemeanor. You're not going to have to go to court, even if later that did get thrown out. You're just not going to have to go through that. So just very good to know. Okay, now we're up to Q&As. And
Hurrah.
before we get to Q&As, I don't want to forget to tell people that this should not be legal advice, right? Like your own situation is going to be particular to you. So if you have questions, you need to consult with an immigration attorney in relation to everything that we've discussed tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, we can take questions.
Yeah. Let's run through just a few of these. So a few people asked about E3s, and sort of the overall question was, is this a bad time to be changing jobs and applying for a new E3 visa? I am already in the US on an E3.
Yeah, I think if you are legitimately here, you're abiding by the rules of your current E3, you're getting paid what you should be getting paid, that's, pursuant to your current E3 and LCA, and you have pay stubs for that job, and you've got a legitimate new job, and you've been abiding, and you don't have any of those other issues, convictions, charges, DUIs, any of those, then you are absolutely fine to change employers right now. We're doing, tens of E3 visa interviews a week where there have been no issues whatsoever.
The next question is, for somebody with green card expiring November 2026, so not too far away, who is also eligible for citizenship, is either path more straightforward than the other?
Okay, so again, just applying for citizenship can be risky, right? So definitely consult with an immigration attorney as to which is better for you. But an important update that happened last year that's good for this person to know is that if you apply for citizenship and you've got a green card that is expiring, your green card will be automatically extended until you become a citizen. So then you don't need to do both, whereas previously you used to have to do both. So if you qualify for citizenship, so in this instance of this person, if they qualify for citizenship, they don't have any reason that could be problematic at their citizenship review, and they want to become a citizen, then in this instance, I would probably advise that person to apply for citizenship if that's what they want, because then they won't need to do the green card renewal.
Right, that makes sense, because then you're a citizen. So another question, asking for a friend on their 7th E3 across a few companies over 12 years and married to a US citizen. Is this a high risk of entry refusal? Hopping around companies,
Yeah, this is a loaded question. First of all, there's a couple of parts to it. So 7th E3, I get this question all the time. I'm on my 10th E3. I think I'm at my max. No, we've had someone since the E3 came out in 2005. It's probably one of the first E3s ever done, who's still on an E3. He wants an E3, doesn't want a green card because for tax purposes, and he's never had an issue. In this instance, the person is married to a citizen. So the first thing I would ask is, when did you get married? Have you been married a while and you've, subsequently renewed your E3s and so forth, or is this fresh? If the marriage is more fresh, then I might say, okay, let's look at, because now you've got to disclose that you have a US citizen spouse on your DS-160. So then I'd be saying, okay, what do we have in terms of home ties? What can we take to the interview to ensure that, this issue of now marrying a US citizen, because you might marry a US citizen but still not have the intent of remaining here permanently, right? Maybe you and your US citizen spouse are planning to have kids and go back to Australia and bring them up there in the Australian education system and, be close to that family. So I think in that instance, it's just really important to be well prepped before you go to interview. And if you are well prepped before you go to interview, it shouldn't be a problem at all. In fact, we have lots of clients in that situation. We have clients who have I have one set of clients that have 4 US citizen kids, and they gave up their green cards actually and have switched to an E3 for tax reasons. and they've kept continuously renewed that E3 without issue, and they've got 4 US citizen kids. We have another client who does have a US citizen spouse who's renewed their E3 multiple times without issue, because for that very reason, they don't want to remain here permanently.
Another question, is it safe to leave the USA for 1 week and be able to return to the USA? This person who specifically asked that is currently on an E3 spouse visa with a same-sex marriage spouse.
Right. I think the question there is that they're thinking, because of all the DEI stuff under Trump, the current administration, that there a risk
of further scrutiny. Yeah.
Same-sex marriage. No, we've had lots of same-sex marriage people travel, no issues whatsoever. You know, it's more if there's another ground of inadmissibility. So, you know, if you're going to have protests against the current American, you know, administration on your phone, then that's why you're getting denied entry, not because you're married to same-sex partner.
Yeah. Next question. Is it advisable to travel on an L1A visa while a green card application is in process?
Great question. Yes, you absolutely can. You're allowed to have immigrant intent. The L1 is, you know, when you do the green card process, you can travel on an advanced parole or an L1. Typically, we'll advise people that do have a current L1 to just continue to travel on that, because while you're on that, you can preserve that L while you're going through the green card process. Yeah. So yes, I would, you know, and I'd need to look at it more thoroughly, but generally, I would say that would be okay.
Last of these Q&As is, if an ESTA has previously been cancelled and I then applied for and received an E3, will I be approved for a B1, B2 visa now? So this person had an ESTA cancelled in the past, applied for an E3, and they're now wondering if they'll be approved for a B1 or B2.
Right. So an ESTA in the past, they got denied entry. They applied for an E3, and now they want a B1, B2. So look, it's good. So I think it's hard to go from an ESTA denial to getting a B1, B2 approved right away, because it's like, oh, I was trying to come in as a tourist and now I want a tourist visa, and I got denied entry as a tourist, but now I want a tourist visa. So it is easier once you've been denied entry to get a visa that is a work visa, because there's a reason why you're coming in. And sometimes they're denying you that entry because they suspect you're working here. So now you're going to get a work visa. So usually that works out okay. So if you've had an E3 in between, typically now you've kind of shown that you did go get a work visa when you needed it. And so as long as you show that you were able to obey the terms of that E3 visa, you should be okay with respect to applying for the B. But again, B visas, look, if you're denied a B visa, you can't use ESTA, but you can't use your ESTA anyway as this person. So there's no risk in applying for it. But when you do apply for it, you want to make sure that you have a good load of documents as to why you want to come in as a tourist. And it shouldn't be to look for work or to study or you don't want to have any reason that you typically need another visa category for. So even like there are some instances where you're allowed to train in the US under a B, but the consulates just don't know how to distinguish. So they're like, oh, you need a J for that. Oh, you need a... So just, I would, if you're going to go through that process, consult with an immigration lawyer, because they'll tell you what documents you should take to your appointment to try and maximize success. And I think also the key documents for a B visa application are always home ties evidence. So you want to show you've resumed some home ties before you apply for it. So, oh yeah, now I've got my license. I renewed my license and my car registration, and I've got an apartment, or, you know, things like that to show that you do have home ties to be able to come in as a tourist.
Great. I think we're out of time, but I want to say thank you so much, Chantelle, for your time and expertise. This is so fantastic. I hope it's alleviated some people's stress and, you know, allow people a little bit of peace of mind. As Chantelle said, this is all sort of general advice in nature, a very excellent general advice, but it is important, obviously, to consult an attorney for your individual case. I also wanted to just spruik once more the June 23 webinar, which we'll be holding, which we'll be able to have a bit more of an open form Q&A. Tonight, we just want to kick it off to get the ball rolling in this immigration series that we're hosting. So thank you so much, Chantelle. Everyone, have a lovely, lovely evening. And we will see you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye. Bye.
Bye.